Welcome to the Center Collaborative, Creative Solutions in Behavioral Health and Criminal Justice, brought to you by the Oregon Center on Behavioral Health and Justice Integration, which is also known as the Center. We at the Center are all about solutions. Our job in Oregon is to facilitate improvement of the system so behavioral health and criminal justice can work better together to engage people in treatment while promoting public safety. I am your host, Chris Thomas. I hold a master's degree in clinical psychology and have focused on the intersection between behavioral health and criminal justice for 20 years. Over 7 of those years were behind the walls of a maximum security prison. During this podcast, you will have the opportunity to sit in on real, in-depth conversations with experts about complex topics in a way that is both fascinating and digestible. We will focus not just on what is wrong with the system, but what is going right and how we can work together to evolve. This podcast is a conversation in a series of conversations where we touch on people's legal rights and their options related to seeking medical care. Since our conversations are intended for informational and educational purposes only, they are not a substitute for or a reason to delay seeking professional legal or medical advice. On this episode of the podcast, I am joined once again by Captain Lee Eby, Clackamas County Jail Commander. He's joined by Cierra Brown, owner of the Metro Law Group and member of the CIDC Consortium, and Dr. Alex Millkey, PsyD from the Northwest Forensic Institute, to talk about Clackamas County's rapid process for in-house fitness evaluations. This highly innovative, creative, and collaborative program has resulted in decreasing the time from arrest to evaluation from 37 days to 6.35 days. 6.35 days. This has resulted in significant fiscal savings, but also has had huge benefits on the human side of the equation. Adults in custody don't spend as long as time in jail and are able to get through the process quickly towards restoration, which means less decompensation. Due to the highly collaborative nature of this program, jail staff are able to have open communication with the defense. The defense is able to come into the jail and see folks cell side if they don't want to see the attorney. So she is able to see, do I need to get an evaluation quicker than the usual route? It's better for the judiciary because cases are able to move faster. It's better for the forensic evaluator because they're able to see people quicker. Overall, this program has benefits for everyone involved in the fitness to proceed process, and it's doable other places. It just takes collaboration and a little bit of tweaking for your program. Welcome to our conversation. Captain Eby, welcome back. I'm thrilled to get you back on the program in season 2. When I had a chance to talk about this fantastic new program that you have going in Clackamas County Jail, I always love hearing about the new innovations over there and wanted to have you on the podcast to talk about your rapid process and the collaboration. So do you want to give me an overview of the program?
Sure. So the program itself is really born out of a issue we've been seeing in the last few years with the increase in individuals with persistent and serious mental illness in jail. Over the last few years, we've seen an increase of over 1,000% from 2013 to 2021 in ordered evaluations in Clackamas County. And the unfortunate problem is what we found, especially with the state hospital, with all the issues and how over capacity they are, time it takes to get somebody evaluated. And we came across a program that had been utilized in some other jurisdictions about doing these evaluations in-house, meaning at the jail itself. And we started a program where those individuals who fall under that serious and persistent mental illness with lower end crimes are then sent to this process where we can actually have it reviewed, and our team then sends that to our contractor, which is Dr. Millkey's association, to have them reviewed and actually do that evaluation in-house with some goals in mind. Number one, our goal is to prevent decompensation, which, as we know, many of these individuals with persistent mental illness who sit in jail for long periods of time, there is a decompensation that happens. Again, trying to speed up that whole process with our partners, because not only does this take time for the jail, which is obviously my focus, but the system itself. And it also eliminates a lot of the transport needs and the weight it puts on the state hospital to get these evaluations done. Overall, that was our intent when we first came up with trying to design the program. It's a little different than some other in-house forensic programs. The gatekeeper, so to speak, in our program is our medical team and the jail itself. We have a team, we call it START, in our jail called Stabilization, Treatment, Assessment, and Reintegration Team. They look at those individuals in our custody who have those serious and persistent mental illness. We work with our local defense and DA to identify those individuals and then get them in this process to save time and effort for the system and all of our partners.
Northwest Forensic Institute is involved in a number of rapid programs in several counties in the state. And one of the things that is unique that Captain Eby referred to with the Clackamas County program is that this is the only program, I believe, anywhere in the state where the gatekeeping function is conducted by a clinical team located within the jail. In some places, it's more of a judicial gatekeeping process, and others, the prosecutor's office, and others, the defense attorney's office. But here it's a clinical team, and that pays dividends in a number of ways. One is that the clinical team is prioritizing cases based on acuity, which is in many ways more compassionate and results in much more accurate referrals. And it also helps create a frictionless environment in the ability of our clinicians to work with the clinicians and security personnel in the jail to establish a close collaborative relationship and find the efficiencies in this system. It's really wonderful.
It also gets rid of the friction on the lawyers, right? So it doesn't matter what the DA wants. It doesn't even matter what I want, quite frankly, as the defense attorney, even though I see my clients all the time and I can gauge their level of acuity of symptoms. The DA can't. They don't have to see it. They don't have to smell it. They're not back there. They have a police report. But by allowing the jail, the people who are locked in a facility with them every single day, make that determination, it takes a lot of stress off me and the defense bar having any sort of adversarial anything, because it's the jail telling us this is the person who is in the worst position this week at this time.
To really make that work, you have to have that trust and collaborative approach that we all are working together on this. And Cierra was right. The jail, we know because we're in there with them, we live with them, we know what's going on. And in our facility last year, 47% of the adults in custody who were housed were on mental health medications. It's a large population, and we are watching it very closely. We know which ones are the most acute, and we want what's best for them. So having our partners trust us to say, hey, this is the next person we need to see, that we need to get this done, because the longer they stay, the more decompensated they'll become, is really part of what makes it efficient.
And of course, Captain Eby is right. It's an enormous proportion of the population here at the Clackamas County Jail that's on psychotropic medications. But what Captain Eby didn't say is not only that it's large, but that it's increasing. He presented some information to the judiciary recently where I believe, 2 years ago, or maybe even less than that, the proportion of people in Captain Eby's jail that were on psychotropic medications was, about 28%?
In 2019, we were a little bit over 25%, almost 26%. And then in 2020, we went up to 35%. And then 2021, we're at 47%. And again, there's a lot of discussion as to why that is. But in addition to what I mentioned with the historical ordered evaluations, which have increased over 1,000%, we are seeing a larger, sicker population.
Having the jail being the source of referral is such an interesting and streamlining innovation. It reminds me of when I used to be working in an institution, And the COs were my eyes and ears of what was going on in the block. They would call me and let me know if one of my clients was decompensating, or if there was someone where we didn't know that there was an issue and they were around that age where the first break happens, and they would let us know that something was happening. So we had those open lines of communication for folks that we knew about and also folks who had not come to our attention yet. I'm wondering, Captain Eby, is that how that's working within your facility?
There's definitely a team effort in the jail, and I'll let Cierra talk about that because she's one of the ones that we bug and we call when we have an individual to try to find out who is representing them and what we're seeing. And that's across the board, from the line staff to our sergeants to our lieutenants. We're talking to them and constantly trying to find out what's the next step. And that's part of our weekly meeting we have, where we're really tabletopping and talking about those in custody and what is our discharge plan. The worst case thing is people falling through the net. I'm not saying it doesn't happen where you get somebody who comes in and it doesn't rise on anybody's radar, but having that communication helps reduce that immensely. Where we have seen people that came in and then they didn't have any observations that they had any type of issues. And then within a couple of weeks, we started noticing things. And then just immediately having that conversation with whether it's our medical, the defense, to try to see what we can do. But I'm sure Cierra can talk a little bit more about the calls she gets from us.
I do get a lot of calls. When I took over mental health court, that's how this all started. The attorney before me retired, and he'd been doing mental health court for 15 years. I took over that role of being the defense attorney running mental health court, not exactly knowing what that would mean, thinking I would just be doing a specialty court. And I quickly started seeing the clients who were most in need were nowhere near ready for mental health court. We were nowhere near ready even talking about their charges, their case, any sort of plea negotiations. They just weren't there. Some of them didn't know their names. And so when I took this over and really saw the rise of mental health, even though I knew it from having just a regular caseload, it was like something has to change, right? So I really wanted to have an open door policy with the jail and with providers because they know more than me. I went to law school. My degrees are in criminal justice. I worked in juvenile correction. None of my stuff is psychological. That's not what I went to school for. So I offered my personal cell phone number to all the people at the jail. And I told them, please use it. If something comes up, call me. And they do. And they don't abuse it in any way, shape, or form. But it has made life so much easier for me as the practitioner, and I hope for them as well. What we did first is Captain Eby invited me to go through their series of trainings to get a jail access card. So rather than seeing my clients in the attorney visiting room, meaning that correction officers would have to take them out of a cell and physically bring them up to the visiting room, which opens the risk for so many things to happen when you have someone in a crisis, I just let myself into the back of the jail. I go cell side and see my clients. Obviously, we're not talking about anything super confidential because we're not there yet. And I think that's the distinction that I want to make clear, that I'm not having these huge conversations ruining confidentiality. It's strictly for the safety of my clients, for the safety of jail staff. The last thing I want, because I learned the hard way, is for more charges to arise because they kicked someone on their way up to the visiting room. So first the jail gave me that access, and then with that access came me being annoying in the admin office and just checking in with everyone back there of, hey, what do you know about this person? What have you seen about this person? And really just starting these open conversations of the deputies' observations of what my client does on a day-to-day basis. Because when I have a conversation, they might be fine in that 5 minutes, but what they do the rest of the day isn't, right? Those are where we see those symptoms, which become really collaborative between myself and the jail. And a lot of times I start my day at 6 a.m. I already have an email from a sergeant at the jail being like, hey, do you know who the attorney is on this? We're having some issues. And I can instantly find out the attorney, tell the attorney, hey, you need to go check in with this client. They're having a mental health crisis currently at the jail, and bridging that gap if they're not my client. But just being able to have the deputies call me, or the sergeant or the captain, whomever, just call me on my cell phone and ask me a question. Hey, do you know if this person's going to get evaluated? hey, do you know if this is happening? We're really struggling with them. It helps move the process along so that we can work together, keep everyone who's in custody safe, keep all the deputies safe who are working in the back, and really just streamline the process.
It's unusual in any type of jail or prison to have attorneys have unfettered access to come in. You don't see that, and there's a lot of reasons why, security-wise. But for this to work, as Cierra mentioned, was there's a difference between this individual who may or may not want to go see their attorney, and then you just tell their attorney they're refusing, and then having them go down there and seeing what they're doing, how they're living, what's going on, changes the focus of the problem immensely. We've known historically a lot of times they come in to see their clients, the client refuses, maybe because they're in a mental crisis, and that's the information that gets back to the attorney. They don't want to see you, they're just screaming, okay. But unless you see them, you're not going to get that. For us, taking away that barrier by allowing Cierra full access, obviously through some training and stuff that we did, really opened that up to where she does come in. But that's a trust thing, and that really does also bode well for our defense that we have in Clackamas County. There's more of a relationship to get things done for the right reasons rather than just do it because this is the way we've always done it. And so we do have a better relationship, and this is where one of those situations are. And I'm sure Dr. Millkey can talk about seeing somebody at cell side versus in an attorney visiting can be two way different scenarios. And oftentimes I'd rather them come down and seeing what they're doing, where they're at, because that in the end helps us.
It's safety for your staff as well as adults in custody. If someone is decompensating, then you're not having to try to get them out of the cell. And then, Cierra, I would also imagine there's also a difference of hearing this person doesn't want to see you and you have no idea what that could be. It could be that they just don't want to see you. It could be that they have symptoms going on. It could be something completely different. And then being able to go cell side. I'm wondering if that's making a difference on how quickly you're able to get to folks and decreasing how far they decompensate in jail because you're able to see them quicker instead of waiting until they don't want to see you, they don't want to see you, they don't want to see you. And then eventually you find out that they're in really bad shape a couple of weeks later versus if you've gone down cell side and being able to see them, you can see what state they're in so you know which way you need to move quicker. I'm wondering if that's making any difference in the long run.
It's making a huge difference. And to go even further than that, when I realized the growing numbers, I mean, I would love to tell you that I take every single case that comes in that has some sort of mental health component. I can't. There's no way I could take on that much. But right now, that's all I take. So for the most part, it goes even further of the person is being arraigned via video. They've been interviewed by someone at the jail. That sheet gets passed on. The judge sees some behavior on the video screen that is not typical behavior, and I get bench pointed on the spot. The court or someone in the courtroom at that moment sends me an email telling me about a new person. And so instead of that lag time of waiting for the person to fill out a court-appointed application, which 9 times out of 10, they're fully not capable of doing so, or waiting for the application to then go to the office who approves those and then go to our CIDC office and then our administrator going down the list of who's next. So there's a 2-3 day lag there sometimes, depending on numbers. I know instantaneously when that person is arraigned, they have a lawyer and it's me. And I can go, if I'm still here at the office, I can go straight to the jail or I can go straight to the jail the next morning and see them. So it's speeding up the process by days at this point. And at least twice a week, I just walk through booking and I talk to the officers who are working the matrix department, who are working the booking stations, and just, hey, is there anyone that came in last night that I should know about? And they know exactly who my clients are going to be for the day. So typically I can meet a lot of my clients before they've even been arraigned, which is even better because if they're going to get released because they're in on a trespass 2, I've already made face-to-face contact with them, given them my business card, which sometimes they just rip up in front of me, but at least I tried. But I've now seen this person. I've now put a face to a name, and I've been able to tell them that it is more likely than not that I'm going to be your attorney. And it really helps. It really speeds everything up. I can get an application into the START team immediately instead of just waiting and waiting, like you were saying, for clients to say, I don't want to see you, because we don't know what that means.
The proof is in the numbers. If you're talking between arrest and the evaluation, just compared our program to last year in 21, we've knocked off 30% time. If you look at going back years, we've got up to 56%. But really for us, and that shows us the time frame from arrest to getting these guys noticed, getting them ready. But really the meat of it for us, and this is where Dr. Millkey's group came in, was trying to get that order and evaluation, where the court said, yes, we want this done. And then the state hospital, in most cases, are doing the evaluation. And for us, we were looking at least 37 days from the time that the order came to the time that the state hospital would see them. The program that Millkey's group does, we've knocked it down to 6.35 days.
The person gets selected on a Tuesday. Dr. Millkey's group does the evaluation on Thursday. I may not be able to get them back into court. The evaluation is happening 48 hours after the selection. And I don't have the report, but I know which way it's going. So I'm already preparing for the next steps instead of waiting. I am knowing the results of my clients within a week of them being in custody. If they are the person selected the minute they get in, I'm knowing within a week.
That's so impressive. Alex, I'm curious, how is this translating into acuity for you and the folks that you see through this program by getting to them early versus the other programs where there's a little bit more wait time?
First, I'd like to piggyback off of what Captain Eby talked about with the efficiencies and what Cierra talked about with the efficiencies. And I'd like to talk about a little bit of what we're seeing. The contract that we have with the county indicates that we are contractually obligated to produce a report within 2 weeks of the referral being made to us. In fact, a typical timeline, I'll take this week's timeline. A person who happens to be one of Cierra's clients, not unusually, I believe had their application submitted for the program on a Monday. They got their slot on a Tuesday. We saw them this morning. This is Thursday. Cierra got an email from us probably about an hour after we finished the interview because we knew what was going on. And we anticipate that Cierra will have an evaluation in hand probably on Monday, if not before. So the numbers that Captain Eby generously produced on this is that the average amount of time it takes for us to produce a report from the time of referral is 6.35 days, so less than a week. Compared to the numbers that I have for the state hospital is the average amount of time from referral from the judge to the person being seen for an evaluation, not when the report is generated, is 32.95 days. That's saves 27 days from the time of evaluation. The evaluation, though, isn't the end of the story because it's not just when the evaluation is received, it's when the fitness issue is ultimately resolved. And what we see, and just for your listeners, when a person is not fit to proceed, what that means is because of a qualifying mental disorder, are not able to understand what's going on with their case, assist and cooperate with their attorney, and or participate in their defense. Everybody has a constitutional right to be able to do these things. You have to be able to do these things. And until you're able to do it, your case cannot go forward in any way. And that may be a plea bargain. It could be a probationary plea offer. It could be prison. It could be a trial. But nothing will happen until this is resolved. How long does it take to resolve? Through the RAPID program, from the time of the issue being raised to the time of the issue being resolved, is 73.8 days. And that's going to sound like a lot of time. And it is a lot of time, though in that time, treatment has to happen and other things. But when you go through the business as usual route, the court-ordered route, it's 131 days. So almost twice as long. So that's good for the examinees. That's good for the system. And although this is not about dollars and cents matters, it's good financially. Now, Captain Eby shared with me that the average cost for the average adult in custody per day is about $116. People in custody with severe and persistent mental illnesses are not your average adult in custody. They cost substantially more to house, to treat, to manage, but we don't know how much that costs. So we'll use the average amount of time using pre-COVID numbers, $116. If you just calculate the return on your investment from referral to time of evaluation, each person who is evaluated through the RAPID program saves in custodial costs $3,103. So that means that for every dollar that the county invests in this program, they're getting back $9.50 in saved custodial costs. If you look at the amount of money saved from the time of referral to the time of the resolution of the fitness issue, it's a much larger number. You're saving $6,740. So that's a return on investment of every $1 that the county puts in of $20.74. And Chris, if I told you I had an investment where if you put $1 in, you would get $20 back, you would not invest in that because you would think it was a scam. But because there are so many inefficiencies in business as usual, putting in these relatively simple interventions that just speed up the amount of time from evaluation from about a month to less than a week saves tremendous amounts of money, suffering, impediments to justice. It is low-hanging fruit. It takes some doing. It takes some cooperation. We have the fortune of having great partnerships with the jail, with the prosecutor's office, with the defense bar, with the judiciary in Clackamas County. And all of these folks working together have managed to find this efficiency. But once people start working together, it's not hard to find those efficiencies. This is a program that can be implemented almost anywhere, as long as people are willing to play nice with each other.
And Captain Eby, I would imagine on top of that cost, there's also the transportation cost if you are going to have to transport folks to the state hospital and back, and also decreasing the probability of something happening in transit if that person is decompensating.
Yeah, transport costs are expensive because you're talking about multiple security staff, you're talking about time. There's a lot of that involved. But I also look at it from not just a safety issue, which it is because of the type of population we're dealing with, but really it's the right thing to do. We're trying to do the right thing, and everybody's on the same page to do that. And unfortunately, some people just don't want to bend, but we had to. Having a defense attorney who has unfettered access to the jail is unheard of. And I'm sure some people listening probably think, that's crazy. Why would you do that? But it's working, and it's causing these numbers, these efficiencies, and then having a good relationship with Dr. Millkey and his crew, and communication with them is ongoing all the time. They come into the facility. They know what's going on. Everybody knows who they are. It just makes things so much more efficient.
Transportation aside, Chris, like you were talking about, you have people who refuse to see us, right? They refuse to see their attorneys. Those same people also refuse to be transported to the state hospital for an evaluation. And once they refuse to go down to the state hospital wants to do a 30-day observation, and that doesn't exist during COVID. So you have someone indefinitely sitting in custody on insert charge here, but let's talk about misdemeanors, just sitting there when we could figure out where this is going one way or the other. Versus Dr. Millkey, I'm going to use him as the great example because the jail and I like to talk about it. He also goes cell side. He has been seen sitting on the floor of the Clackamas County Jail interviewing my clients. And even if the client doesn't want to talk to him, he's at least putting eyes on him. He is making that observation, seeing the behaviors inside the cell, which are invaluable to be able to make a determination about fitness. And so when we have these low-level misdemeanors, especially low-level misdemeanors, that we know we don't have the time to restore, they're going to get dismissed, instead of having them sit in custody for 60 days, which sometimes is past the maximum possible penalty they can get, I know within a week which way this is going to go and whether or not I can get them restored in the community, whether or not I can get their case dismissed, and we get them out of the jail.
In an ideal world, we don't need this program. But in the best version of the world that we live in, when you do a forensic evaluation, you'll have a person go to a room where you can sit and you can have a lengthy conversation where you're able to talk about all the issues, and the person tolerates that and gives you clear, honest, straightforward, easily understandable information. But battle plans survive until first contact with the enemy. And one of the best things that you can do is plan for things to go wrong and be pleasantly surprised when that doesn't happen. If a person can't be safely transported to an interview room, much less to the state hospital an hour away, the best thing you can do is the best that you can do. And if that means going and sitting on the floor and talking maybe for a couple of hours through a cuff port, maybe through 4 or 5 minutes, or maybe the person has catatonia and can't speak at all, but you can go back and you can see them. And if that gives you the information you need to be able to move the person forward in a legal, judicial, clinical, human, ethical, moral manner, then that's what you should do.
And what a difference for you, too, to be able to do that versus they don't want to see you and then you don't have any other information. I imagine that makes a huge difference for you.
There can be 1,000 reasons for a person to not want to talk to me. And which reason it is matters tremendously as it regards their mental health and their capacity to understand what's going on, to work with their defense attorney, and to participate in their defense.
Speaking of the right thing to do, using your language, Captain Eby, it also strikes me as the difference it makes for the adults in custody who are going through this process. They're being seen so much quicker, and what a difference that has to make on their symptomology and how they're doing. And then later on, when you're talking about restoration, because they haven't decompensated to the level that they might have in another situation, that restoration could happen more quickly. I'm wondering if that's the case.
We can initiate restoration more quickly. There's a number of situations. One is the jail will often have very young people coming in who might be having their first psychotic episode. And when a person is developing that first psychotic episode, time is of the essence, not only for trying to restore them to fitness, but to affecting clinical change that can have a long-term, by which I mean for the rest of a person's life, effect on their ability to function and have a meaningful, fulfilling life. The fact that we're able to see people more closely to when they come into the jail, and also the fact that there's all these great relationships, not only with the people who are participating in this episode today, but also with, not to name drop, but Mindy Coronado, Paul DeRoche with the Community Restoration Program, who don't mind texting, calling, emailing, passenger pigeoning, telegraphing to try and solve these problems. You're able to move people along either to the state hospital or to community restoration faster. I do want to mention that there is no silver lining so bright that there's not a dark cloud in there somewhere. And the dark cloud of seeing somebody so quickly sometimes is that Oregon, unfortunately, has a huge quantity of methamphetamine floating around in it. And when people use substantial quantities of methamphetamine, or sometimes actually surprisingly small quantities of methamphetamine, it can induce a psychotic state. And that psychotic state can persist once a person stops using methamphetamine. Now, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, those psychotic symptoms begin to abate relatively quickly, and you will usually see some benefits within a couple of weeks of abstinence. Not always. It can go on and on, but usually. Sometimes we'll see somebody in jail who has been using methamphetamine, and we think this might be a methamphetamine-induced psychotic state. And we don't want to, we, the evaluators, or really anybody in the system, don't want to incorrectly say this is a person who has schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder or something else like that, and end up with them going to the state hospital only to clear up without treatment. Cierra, I'm sure, is thinking of a very specific person that we worked with where this was the case. And I happened to be the evaluator. I talked to the person. I thought, they are psychotic. They aren't fit to proceed. But I think if we just take a knee for a little while, that we might see improvement. And this might just be a methamphetamine-induced condition. So I pushed producing the evaluation all the way to the 2-week limit specified in our contract. And then here we go with the frictionless relationship with the jail, picked up the phone and called the folks in the jail and said, how is this person doing? turned out they had cleared up. They were clear as a bell. And then I called Cierra, said, I can't believe it. They were so ill. Went in the back door of the jail, I think maybe an hour later, came back and called me and said, yep, they're good to go. So you just have to be thoughtful in cases like that. Generally speaking, seeing people so quickly is good, but you have to be a little careful.
The program is not just a tool for defense. The initial study showed 20% of the people that we referred went forward in some form of being able to defend themselves. Even though we are doing a lot more to try to identify them and make sure the right people are going, we're not clinicians. That's what Dr. Millkey and his group does. And so they're, like the story told, there's other things that we just don't know about, which I'm fine with because we're trying, again, do the right thing. We see somebody in what we think is a crisis and we want to get this resolved quickly, not wait and see. And so we refer to that. It is helpful the way we're doing it, and we are seeing a lot of them, but not all of them. Not all are finding that they can't aid and assist.
Those ones that can aid and assist by the time we get the report back, though, I also think it's great information of sometimes it's just a behavioral issue that as a lawyer, myself or one of my colleagues couldn't identify when we met with the person or the client that Dr. Millkey was just talking about. I had seen her the day before Dr. Millkey interviewed her and completely had a meltdown in the courtroom screaming that spiders were coming out of my neck when it was really my bow tie. Even though it wasn't a finding of unable, that's still okay for me as the defense attorney because ethically, I did not feel this person was fit and I could not move forward with their case. I now have a professional telling me, hey, person need to dry out a little bit. We're much better. Or, hey, this was behavioral. They're just having a bad day. It covers me so that I can make sure that I am moving forward in a way that is ethical and is advocating for my client correctly.
Sounds like that is really the secret sauce, so to speak, of this program is the collaboration between disciplines. So nobody has to be an expert outside of their realm of expertise, but you are able to pick up the phone and talk to one another. Like the case you were talking about, Dr. Millkey, you called them up and said, hey, I'm going to wait a little bit to see what's going on with this. And then, Cierra, you were able to go check and it was quite different. I would imagine that is really refreshing.
It is. It's so refreshing, and it takes a huge amount of stress off of me as a practitioner. When you have clients sitting in jail pending fitness to proceed, there's only so much you can do. And there's only so many times you can go see them without an update because you are in between a rock and a hard spot of, are they okay? I've raised this flag. I can't unraise it at this moment. Are they okay to move forward? Are we okay to move forward and start plea negotiations, especially on low-level cases where you get an offer from the DA that's 48 hours in jail? The last thing you want to do is have a client sign plea paperwork because they desperately want out of jail when they are not fit to proceed, and that can come back around and bite all of us. So it is incredibly refreshing that we have this trusting relationship between all of us where there is no qualms about picking up the phone and calling one another to just relay information.
In the criminal justice situation, even when the stakes are low, the stakes are high because you're talking about people's freedom, they're talking about criminal records, you're talking about stigma for people with severe and persistent mental illness who are already trying to contend with that. So it's not just going in and doing a quick drive-by. I don't want to convey the impression that because these evaluations are rapid, that they are abbreviated or diminished or cursory. They are not. We reserve time in our schedule as a practice, which allows us to do a full evaluation. Usually when things go, we're talking about an interview of maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then Judge Carabika here in Clackamas County has been kind enough to draft an order that we can submit to various agencies, including mental health at the jail, but also to the state hospital, who's had a lovely collaborative relationship with us when it comes to providing records, and to Unity, which is a large psychiatric hospital that serves the metro region, and all these other agencies. That allows us to get records within 2 days at the most, sometimes 24 hours. And so we're in a position where we get the case assigned on a Tuesday. Judge Carabika typically signs the order on a Tuesday. The order specifies that we get the records within 2 days. So by the time we see the person on Thursday morning, we'll often know whether they've been to the state hospital. We'll definitely know what the jail medical staff are seeing. We'll usually know, have they been getting services through Clackamas County or some other community mental health agency? And we're able to build on that history. And that's one of the things that, for example, will help us understand is what we're seeing an endogenous psychiatric condition, or is that methamphetamine? And what can we anticipate in terms of prognosis, what needs to happen to support this person?
So we have a schedule every week, Thursday. We have specific time and day that we have already every week lined out for Dr. Millkey and his crew to come here. So it's very similar to when we get an order to say, you're going to the state hospital, and the state hospital says, hey, here's the date and time you're going. What we've done is we've cut all that middleman out and made it so we already know what day it's going to happen. We're not transporting, they're coming up here. And it's the full boat, so to speak, evaluation. We've just already planned it all out. It's not abbreviated in any way. It's just we've made it more efficient by saying we know when it's going to be, we know where it's going to be, and make it just easier for all of us involved.
As I'm listening to you, Captain Eby, and I'm glad that you're talking about flipping it on its head of what you would usually do, because I can imagine hearing about this program, how well it works, high collaboration, how quickly you move people through, and the money that it saves. It makes me think, Alex, of when you said, Chris, you could invest $1 and get 20 back. And I'd be like, ha, ha, ha. No. It sounds like it's working so well. It could be overwhelming to think about putting a program like this in place. And yet from chatting with you before, it sounded like it's something that isn't terribly difficult to put in place, but it requires a great deal of collaboration. And I'm wondering if you all can talk about that so folks don't just get overwhelmed by how amazing it is and think we could never do that here. Is this something that could happen somewhere else?
Captain Eby was really the tip of the spear with engineering this, so I'm going to defer to Captain Eby to kick off the conversation.
Yes, it can be done. I think the number one thing is it really does take all the stakeholders to sit down at the table and want to do it. We have a very unique system, I think, in some regards because of the relationships, but easily replicated. Our defense bar here in Clackamas County works with us. We have a very collaborative relationship. I know that's not true of all, and some people are going to say, there it is. That's why it's not going to work. But the reality is we got to take those aside and say, okay, what is our end goal here? My end goal was to help those individuals in our custody and help my staff, because the longer they sit in my jail, the more likely they're going to decompensate, which more likely puts my staff at risk of something bad happening. And I want to reduce that. And if me reducing that means I got to put my ego aside and say, let's have a relationship, then let's do it. The paperwork I have, it's easy. The contract, easy. But the relationship, and that really is just sitting down. Now, we had a lot of that already, but it's not like you can't replicate it anywhere. What is your desire? What is your population? What is the percentages? What do you know you're looking for? And then just develop it with the right partners. It would not have worked with just myself, both having Dr. Millkey and his group and Cierra and the DA's office, everybody working together is the only way it is successful.
I'm going to second that. I knew it would be successful when we started it. I didn't know it would be this successful. When we did the 6-month mark of going through the numbers, they're my clients. I should know the numbers, but seeing it on a PowerPoint in a graph, it blew me away. It's working. It blew me away. And Captain Eby's right. You could do this anywhere. They should do it more places, but it really does help that we do work well together. The DA's not at the table today, but they were a part of this too. We had months and months of communication and meetings and trying to figure out and arguing back and forth of who should be in charge and who should do what. And when Captain Eby just stood up and was like, I'll do it. The jail will do it. Me and the DA were like, well, can't argue with that. That makes sense. And it does help that we are an adversarial system by default and nature of our jobs. But at the end of the day, Clackamas County works really well together. We are a very special, unique county, and I don't know how it started, and I don't know how we got here, but at the end of the day, even on our worst day, we work incredibly well together, all parties, and it makes it work.
Northwest Forensic Institute is involved in rapid programs in a number of different counties, and my experience is that the program tends to take on the characteristics of the county in which the program is seated. And sometimes that can be challenging, and sometimes that can be amazing. The fact that Captain Eby and the jails put their hand up and said, we'll take this on, we'll take ownership of this, was not something I anticipated. It's not something I had ever seen before, but in the marketplace of ideas, the laboratory of ideas, it was an innovation that I'm so grateful for, because this is the only place that we're involved in where the referrals come through a clinical team, and that has made a real difference. It takes a certain amount of edge out of it. There's less fighting. Some counties there's more fighting, some counties there's less fighting. And some of your listeners may be in rural counties. I know that criminal justice and mental health in rural counties is a particular passion of yours, Chris. And they may think, well, we don't have a number of people going through where we could fill one slot a week. And that's absolutely true. But it doesn't have to be one slot a week. In Multnomah County, decidedly not a rural county, we have 4 slots a week. In Clackamas County, we have 1 slot a week. Right now, we're working to develop a rapid program in another county. It's not developed yet, so I won't say the name, but that's a rural county, and that is going to be 1 slot every 2 weeks. Out east, if it were out there, it might be 1 slot a month. You're still saving time over business as usual with that. This is something that can be adapted and just naturally will be adapted depending on where the seeds fall. It happens to be that Clackamas County is incredibly fertile ground for that seed to grow in.
So I'm curious, and Alex and Captain Eby know me well. I'm a curious soul. If having this level of communication early in the process is having any impact on being able to change from the forensic route over to the civil route in cases where the civil route looks like the route to go, if that is something that is able to happen more quickly in this county because of your communication, or if this is making any difference in diversion and deflection efforts for folks with behavioral health concerns.
I think we've tried more to divert to the civil route with the use of this program because we're catching things quicker. But the unfortunate piece of that is, I was just talking about this morning to a group of law enforcement officers, begging them to please take people to the hospital first instead of the jail, for the reason that once they hit the jail and they're in a secure facility, they are no longer a danger to themselves or others. It is almost impossible to meet that threshold under our current laws and statutes. I don't think we're seeing that more. Now, I will say the DA's office is getting a lot more creative because they're having to dismiss more cases. Just nature of the beast, right? You have someone come in on contempt charges or trespass 2. We don't have time to restore. We don't have places in the community. So the DA's office is getting quicker results to try to convince family members to get guardianships, do magistrate holds, other avenues like that. Is it successful yet? It's a work in progress, but it's a nice turn of events. Instead of focusing strictly on convictions and prosecution, our DA's office is recognizing that they have to dismiss the criminal aspect, but how can we get the family members who are involved more to get people the help they need? So that is an interesting shift that has just started with the use of this rapid program, which is, I think, beneficial. But unfortunately, it just doesn't help us pivot as much as we'd like to the civil side.
There has been a lot of resources poured very recently into mental health treatment and infrastructure here in Oregon. We haven't seen the effects of that yet, but I think that we can all agree that there need to be more options in terms of ways of supporting people. There's just not enough resources in the community to help people, full stop, people. And for the people who get involved in the criminal justice system, who have a severe and persistent mental illness, whose behavior that got them in trouble with the law is really the product of unmanaged mental health symptoms. This is a great opportunity to try to divert people into some of the resources that may exist, and hopefully there will be more resources existing. So if we take advantage of some of these innovative programs, some of the resources that may be developed, when you interviewed Dr. Leeper and Dr. Avila, about psychiatric advance directives if we could take the opportunity once a person's stabilized, whether that's working with their family, in a hospitalization, in a community placement, in the jail, and they can put in place some advanced planning for what happens should this happen again. I think there's a lot of opportunities. Again, the RAPID program is such a success because there's so many inefficiencies in the system that you can pick low-hanging fruit and it can make changes by orders of magnitude. I think probably the same is true of our mental health system as a whole in Oregon and also around the country.
Such a good point. And psychiatric advance directives also, when someone is stable at the end of a mental health court, I think would be an interesting possibility as well to help continue that stability.
Agreed.
Is there anything else that we haven't talked about or that you feel like our listeners should know about this program?
I just want people to feel unintimidated about putting something like this in place in their communities with their resources. I know that anybody who is on this episode today would be happy to talk to folks and offer them encouragement from their particular perspective to help them try and put something like this in place.
I also think it's important to note that this isn't anything negative against the state hospital. I'm not taking anything away from the evaluations that they do and the doctors that they use for 365s, those initial evaluations. They do great work. But the pandemic has really hindered their ability to do a lot of work. They're constantly in the news. They're understaffed. They don't have the time. They don't have the beds. They've had to really limit their resources. And so this program is not started because we wanted to shift away or we weren't seeing quality of work from the state hospital. But I think what this program has really done, which I hope that listeners involved in other counties can take away from this, is really what we're doing is we're acknowledging the rise in mental health cases we're seeing through the criminal justice system, and we are taking some of that burden off the state hospital in a expedited fashion. Because I can get someone with a rapid evaluation much quicker than just getting private funding. Because that's a question I get a lot from colleagues. Why don't I just get funding for a private evaluation? Sure, do that. I do it all the time myself. But if I have someone who is really deteriorating, I know they can't aid and assist. Things are just getting worse, and it's clear the jail is not the place for them. That's also not a knock on the jail either. It's just the jail is not a place for people who are in that much of a crisis. I can get this done so much quicker and get my client moving in the direction that will help them and restore them or get them out of jail or whatever the outcome may be. I'm doing that a lot quicker than using the standard 365 model or just getting funding for a private evaluation. That is not a knock on any of those people. It is just another outlet to achieve the exact same result in a much quicker fashion.
Captain Eby, do you have anything you'd like to add?
We also have the wraparound type services involved too, where it's discharge planning also. It's one thing to say, okay, we've got this evaluation, the person's not fit to proceed. The defense does their thing with the DA and they make a determination whether they drop the case. There's still more to the story. What happens after that? For us, we have also more robust discharge planning involved. And if we're involved at the beginning, which we are in these cases, and we know these individuals, it makes it so much easier to come up with a plan when they do walk out the door, because eventually they are going to walk out the door. The hope is that it's in a really great spot that we have services ready for them, but you do have to prepare yourself for that also. It doesn't just end at the program. There's more to it.
And I think following up on that, I would urge defense attorneys in other places, talk to the people at your jail. It wasn't until I started taking on a heavier mental health caseload that I learned how many resources were inside the jail that I had no clue, especially the discharge planning. When I have those little cases that are going to get dismissed, meaning my client's going to walk out of there with zero resources, that discharge team is working all day. And I have seen them move mountains to make sure that my client's not just walking out of the door into nothing, especially in the wintertime. So I would urge lawyers in the defense bar, get to know the people at your jail. get to know the resources that are available, because I think you'd be really surprised at what all jails have in their departments.
Discharge planning can be so important in taking people out of a revolving door. I was just speaking with somebody yesterday, not in Clackamas County Jail, in a different jail, and this is a person who I had evaluated months ago. In fact, this was the fourth or fifth time I've evaluated this particular individual over the last 5 years. He was very stable. He had gone to the state hospital. He had come back and he said, I feel great. I feel better than I've been in years. I'm just really afraid that I'll walk out of here. I won't have medications. I won't be able to get them. And what's going to happen to me? Being able to have a team just help bridging somebody to where they're able to get services and get a little momentum behind their recovery outside of a institutional environment can make a huge difference. And it is really penny wise and pound foolish not to do it.
I know there's been a lot of discussion over the years around discharge planning in jails and how it's very different than discharge planning from prisons, because prisons generally, once in a while, you have a surprise, but most of the time, you know when someone's going. But jails, the movement can be much quicker and much more sudden. So I'm wondering about, one, the collaborative piece of it, because it sounds like Cierra and Captain Eby, you all talk quite a bit around that discharge planning. I'm sure that makes a huge difference. So I'm curious about that piece of it, but I'm also curious, Captain Eby, could you also speak to the nuts and bolts of what goes into that discharge planning and how you were able to make those moving pieces work within the jail?
I can tell you that discharge planning, especially in jails, is at times a little bit of luck because we don't always know when somebody gets out. It's not like planned prison. You have to almost start the moment that they come into the facility and keep them on your radar. Does that mean we do everyone? No. There are ones that get through stuff we don't know about. The courts decide all of a sudden their time served. And unfortunately right now, as Dr. Millkey said, we have not necessarily seen the result of the infuse in treatment or resources in the community in Oregon yet. And that's probably our biggest issue here is, so we have people that are involved, discharge planners, that really looks at our acute mental illness in the jail. We try to keep them on our radar and go, okay, what's going to happen if they get out? And what is our goal? Unfortunately, it's not just having one or two people. You have to have everybody. In fact, today we had an individual who has come into our facility numerous times and has some mental health issues. And our DA has agreed to drop charges again. They're minor charges. And problem is, where do you take them? What are the resources? And in this case, it's been very difficult. I've been on a text and email string that involves almost everybody in the jail, from our sergeants, lieutenants, community health, mental health. Everybody is involved. It really takes everybody to kind of lean in on these cases because the resources are so scarce. And most of our cases are very complex. They're not easy. And with that, what you really have to do is start it at the beginning when they come in, or when you're identifying them. You have to regularly, weekly or more, keep them on that radar and discuss what are our options. You've got to get your partners involved. And I say partners from your county health, your county mental health, your defense attorneys, because if they're going for a plea that's going to get them out next week and they don't tell us, and all of a sudden next week comes along and that person's out, we've just wasted a whole week where we could have been planning. You really need to have those kind of relationships and progress moving forward. Like Cierra said, a lot of the jails in Oregon, and I know all the jail commanders, they're a good group. They do want to do what's right, and they do try to help. And every jail has different resources, but we do have resources, not unlimited, but the more people work together, the more we can utilize or leverage some of these resources to help people. And the goal, as Dr. Millkey mentioned, is that you have good discharge planning. You're breaking the cycle. Because if you just let them out the door without any type of plan, the odds of them coming back are pretty high. And we just wasted all that resources, that $20 that we would have been making, we just threw it away. And so it really is about early on and identification in your facilities and keeping an eye on what their cases are and what's happening.
It's pretty incredible. I'll get clients back from the state hospital, and I don't even know they've hit the jail yet. And I'm already getting emails and messages from the discharge planners of, hey, do you have any idea which way this is going? I think I can find resources here. I think I can find housing here. And it makes me feel better as a practitioner also, because my job is not what's best for my client. My job is to advocate for my client. And sometimes advocating for my client isn't necessarily setting them up with all the resources necessary. They just want to plead and get out because they've spent the last year in a hospital and they're done. So to have this secondary team behind putting in so much work is pretty incredible. I think, Captain Evie, we were talking about the same person. As I said, I was in a training this morning, and I had someone from the jail walk right up to me and say, so-and-so is back. And within 15 minutes, the jail told me their plan. I called the DA. The DA agreed to decline the case. I told the jail again, and everything was in works. It really works when we all work together. People need to realize that as adversarial as this process is and the criminal justice system is, at the end of the day, I think we all want the same outcome. We want people to be successful. We want the people in society to be active members of society. We also recognize that a lot of people have criminal behavior, not because they're criminals and they're horrible people, but they don't have the resources to be able to feed themselves or afford their medication, or they self-medicate, or they're houseless. And until we fix those core issues, we're not going to get anywhere. And we're only going to fix those issues if we all work together. Teamwork
Makes the dream work, and it doesn't always work out, but it works out here a lot more often than it seems to work in other places. I really admire all the efforts that people have put in to making this system work as well as it does.
I think the one thing I would leave listeners who are looking at this or wanting to start that is you've got to step up, and you basically have to raise your hand and say, I'm going to take some ownership into this. You got to really just tell people, okay, we got to put the egos aside. We got to get this working because it's not working. I say that because I've seen it over the years. It doesn't work. It is very inefficient, and we do see people fall through the cracks, unfortunately. And like Dr. Millkey say, is it perfect? No. Don't get discouraged is the one thing, because the one that Cierra's talking about, it's the same person we're talking about today, came back again. We could sit there and go, we failed, and just let's move on. No, we go, okay, we jumped right back in the saddle and said, okay, what are we going to do today? Hopefully the idea we have is good. I'm hoping we will see. If not, then we'll get back in the saddle again.
Complicated problems are hard to solve. That's just the way it is. And some problems are very complicated, right? How to fix a whole system. Some problems are surprisingly uncomplicated. How do you speed up how quickly you can do fitness evaluations? You solve the problems that you can, and you work on the problems that you can't until hopefully you eventually find a solution. But even if you don't find the solution, the effort can make a difference.
The thing is that there is probably not going to be one solution that is going to fix all of our problems that we have in this intersection between behavioral health and criminal justice and the larger umbrella problem of folks getting into the criminal justice system because of what's happening in the behavioral health system. And when I see that, not only folks with psychiatric diagnoses, but also I'm including in that with folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities and neurocognitive conditions that also come to the attention of the criminal justice system. There's probably not going to be that one thing. It's about finding these smaller pieces that start making those improvements in the system towards a better system. Because if we're all waiting for that one thing, we're going to be waiting until the end of time for that. But we all can take the smaller step to make smaller improvements in the system.
I hope that we will move into a situation where we end up with a lot of different tools in our toolbox that we can come to bring to bear on the unique challenges that are experienced by the people who we come into contact with as a group. And I think a part of the special sauce moving forward, I don't know what the solution or solutions will be, but I know a part of the solution will be a willingness to be creative and dynamic.
Agreed. So with that, what are your last thoughts for our listeners?
I think recognizing that it's not a one-size-fits-all situation when we talk about mental health, when we talk about substance abuse, when we talk about a houseless crisis, what works for one person isn't going to necessarily work for anyone else. And the reason that this program works here for us, the RAPID program in particular, is because we recognize that. All of us at the table are willing to get creative. We're able to communicate with one another. Communication really is the key. If I didn't have Captain Eby, if I didn't have Dr. Millkey, if I didn't have the certain DAs I work with on a daily basis, nothing would get done, and it would feel like I'm hitting my head against a brick wall over and over again. Recognizing that every person is in a unique situation and having that ability to humanize my clients in a way that hopefully helps get them any sort of services or help with the assistance of these people at the table is really incredible. And I just hope that other people can do the same thing.
I think my take-home message that I'd like people to walk away from this episode with is we've talked a lot about Clackamas County. We've talked a lot about all the resources and relationships that are here. But I don't want people to feel that if you're practicing in a jurisdiction, and this is the case for most jurisdictions, where you don't have discharge planning, where perhaps the relationship between the defense and prosecutorial bars are significantly more adversarial than what we're describing here today. If you're in a situation where none of these things that we've talked about are in place, this is still low-hanging fruit and a program that almost every stakeholder will find it is in their enlightened best interest to try and move fitness evaluations through the system more quickly. This is something that can be done even if none of what we've talked about is present. It's doable. The fundamentals are not complicated. It just requires the willingness to collaborate a bit and identifying the resources that you need to make it happen.
Alex, I think also you said this earlier, and I just wanted to make sure people heard you say it too. You're not even saying that they need to work with y'all as the evaluators, that you're saying that this would work with other agencies. You just want to see this work across Oregon.
Right. I went into forensic psychology for lots of reasons, and one of those reasons is because I want to help navigate the nexus between the criminal justice system and people who are experiencing severe and persistent mental illness. I want to see the world become a better place. I don't have to be directly involved in making the world better. I just want to see it get better. And if it's something that agency wants to partner with Northwest Forensic Institute on, fine. If they want to partner with somebody else, fine. I am happy to offer free advice about how to do this. I just want to see things get better, and I know that they can.
Well said. Captain Eby, do you have any last words?
I would just reiterate what Dr. Millkey said, is that if you're trying to develop a program and you have questions or just want to spitball, please contact any of us. We're not going to charge. We'll help as much as we can and give them advice or what we would think might work. As long as we can get a process in place in other jurisdictions, I think it helps everybody.
Thank you so much, all of you. Captain Eby, Cierra, Alex, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. This is such an important program, and I am so excited to have you with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting us. This was great.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
The Center Collaborative is a production of the Oregon Center on Behavioral Health and Justice Integration, a specialized division of Greater Oregon Behavioral Health Incorporated. It is produced by me, Chris Thomas, with production assistance from Patrick Kennedy. Music by Patrick Mulvihill and Patrick Kennedy. Subscribe to the Center Perspective using your favorite app. To learn more about criminal justice and behavioral health in Oregon, visit the Center's website at ocbhji.org. You can also find us on Facebook. We'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to us. Join us next time as we chat with the experts about programs and partnerships at work within this complex and yet compelling field.